Mayor and Council, as you're aware, we put funding towards a business plan and rate review in the budget. Been working on that for multiple months now. And we're at that point where we kind of need some guidance from the council in terms of several different aspects, and we'll go over them tonight. They are fairly weighty decisions, so we don't want council to have to worry about making a decision tonight. We'll probably bring it back at our next work session after you've heard the presentation and can think about it, because same thing that we went through on some of the water review. Where do we want to go? Do we looking at the equity in terms of cost of service between commercial and residential? Do we go market rate on commercial to help offset residential, or do we put them at equal footing in terms of cost of service? What do we do with alley cleanup? So there's a lot of questions in here that are really service level and policy direction that we're looking from council to help guide us as we put the rest of the package together, and any potential recommendations in the future about what that could end up being in terms of a cost adjustment if required, or what that would look like. So again, go over where we're at tonight and answer any questions, and then probably bring it back, like I said, in 3 weeks at the next work session. That way have enough time to fully digest, ask any questions in between, and then be able to hopefully give us guidance at that following meeting. So with that, I'll turn it over to Director of Public Works, Susie Turner.
Thank you, Doug. Good evening, Your Honor and council members. We've been collaborating with our solid waste consultant, Burns and McDowell, on developing our solid waste master plan. With me tonight is Mr. Scott Pasternak. He is the lead planner for the solid waste and resource recovery practice for Burns and McDonnell. He's been in this field since the 1990s and has focused his career on working with clients to solve challenging and technical and financial solid waste management and recycling issues. So we brought on a consultant that had a lot of knowledge in the solid waste fields to help us developing our first master planning document for solid waste. Scott's been working since the 1990s, but he's worked throughout the United States, most recently even here in Montana, supporting Billings, Bozeman, and Helena, and now helping the city of Kalispell as we develop our solid waste master plan. So as Doug alluded to, we're going to go through our existing operations, costs of service. We're really looking for a lot of direction from council on some policy issues to help us then move to the next step of the master planning, rate structure, and really financial policy. So through this process, I've actually learned quite a few things that were kind of brought to light as we do more of a deep dive into our service for solid waste. So you'll find it's really quite interesting, and really, like Doug said, we've got some initial information, but we're gonna build on that based off of our conversations tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Scott.
All right. Well, Susie, thank you so much, and good evening, Mayor and City Council members. It's an honor to be here tonight. Susie, I should have updated my bio for you, because the most important part of my bio is that I was a member of Post 29 when I was in the Boy Scouts. So it's pretty awesome that we have Troop 1901 here tonight. And in all sincerity for you Scouts, so the work that I do now has very much an environmental and community focus, and a lot of that goes back to my days of my roots as a Boy Scout. So it's really awesome to see you all here tonight. So with that, back to the main discussion, and that is to talk about this solid waste master plan for the city of Kalispell. And what we have, no, going the wrong way. I'm not a lefty, is my problem with the mouse. So I'm trying to do this left-handed. Alrighty. So what we have for you tonight is to first start off with a discussion of what the project is all about, to give you that overview. And then from there, we want to provide you with an understanding of what the current solid waste services are here in the city of Kalispell, both in terms of an overview of the analysis that we've done to this point, in terms of a pretty deep dive on an operational and financial analysis. And then from there, there's several alternatives that are being evaluated as a part of the master plan. We're right about halfway through our schedule that I'll show you in a few minutes in the development of the master plan. So we're far enough along to where we want to have an initial conversation with the council about some of those issues, but we're definitely not so far along that we've developed our conclusions or recommendations, because we really want to get key insight and input from you all this evening and over the coming months. We also, just as of last Friday, in collaboration, launched a customer survey. So we'll have information about how everybody in the Kalispell community can participate in that. And then we'll wrap up with a discussion about the next steps in the master plan development. So in terms of an overview of the project, this slide gives you a graphic representation of the project approach. So I won't go through each one of these items, but if we look at this from left to right, where we've started with is an evaluation of the existing system. Spent quite a bit of time here in Kalispell, riding routes, talking with Gene and Billy and their team, doing extensive operational or collection analysis, as well as a cost of service model. That's the basis of the financial work, and we'll talk about both of those in detail this evening. And from there, we then move into the development of different strategies and options, as well as analyzing trends within the industry. And so tonight we'll be identifying and talking through some of those key alternatives with you all. We are at kind of the beginning stages of evaluating the financial and operational impacts of those different alternatives, because again, we wanted to get some key direction from council and to inform the analysis. But future steps will be the development of business strategies so that we can then provide you all with a prioritized list of what those options and strategies will be. And then on the far right is the development of the master plan itself. So that will include developing implementation and funding plans, as well as a schedule of when things will be implemented as part of the planning process. And then along the bottom of the slide, you see stakeholder engagement. This is the first of 3 meetings and or workshops with the council, as well as the survey that we'll talk about a little bit toward the end of our presentation. So this slide essentially takes the same information from the prior slide, but shows it in terms of our project schedule. And so we started off in June of last year. That's when we really got into the financial and operational analysis that we'll talk through with you all tonight. So the orange represents our project management efforts, and then the blue are the financial analyses. Kind of the Gatorade colored green is the operational and alternatives analysis, and then the darker blue is the actual drafting of the master plan. So that dotted line is here in January, conveying that we're right about halfway through the schedule. And so we've completed the baseline operational and financial analysis. We're just now starting to get into the alternatives and starting to think about potential rate recommendations. But this is really an optimal time to come before the council to talk about our analysis to date, as well as what needs to be done in the coming weeks. Okay, thank you. So in terms of the current services and analysis, this slide just gives you a broad overview of what the services are here within Kalispell. So from an employee perspective, there's 1 supervisor and then 6 full-time and 1 part-time operator. And then in terms of the collection vehicles, it's important to not have not only your frontline or your primary trucks, but also you need to have backup trucks because when a truck is out for routine maintenance, or if it goes out of service, the trash has got to be collected that same day. So having those backups is really important. So there are 3 primary sidearm trucks with 2 backups, 1 primary rear loader with 1 backup, as well as a pickup truck and a flatbed truck. So if you're not completely clear on what these trucks look like, we'll show you photos of them in action on the next couple of slides. So each day, each week, Gene, Billy, and the guys have got to pick up a little over 4,500 residential and 1,800 collections per week. And on the commercial side, we'll talk about that this evening. That also includes servicing city facilities. And this work is provided via 4 collection routes. There's 2 for residential that are picking up the smaller cans, which are 90-gallon containers. And then there's an alley route that services both residential and commercial. And then another route that's focused on commercial rear loaders. And so it takes a lot of not only effort, but really critical and creative thinking on the part of the staff here to really figure out how can you provide what is really a very diverse set of services with only 4 main routes, and knowing that these are pretty intense service demands on a week in, week out type basis. There's also a screenshot over here of a dashboard that the city has developed that is accessible on the city's website. It has a lot of really great information. You can really get into that to actually see what are the routes that each of these trucks follow each day.
If I might, as a part of this process, we took quite a bit of time in updating our GIS database so we could do the routing. That's going to kind of help us now and in the future to see where our holes are, where we're at capacity. I was going to pull it up and show it all, but it's kind of slow, so I thought it would take up too much time. But it actually is a very successful tool and resource we use on a daily basis. And it's just a city portal, so it's just for internal use. But there is a public portal that does show the areas we're in each day through the website.
So here are those pictures, the action shots, if you will. So this really is taking that same type of information that was on the preceding slide. It gives you a better visual representation. So from left to right is the residential curbside sidearm. And then those same trucks will also collect the larger 300-gallon containers in the alleys. But then in the alleys, there's also additional collection of yard waste and bulky material, and that's provided via the rear loader. And then the city also provides the spring cleanup, and that's shown by the set out of material on the right-hand side. And so on the bottom of the slide, it shows what the number of trucks are, both from a primary and backup perspective. So then this slide communicates similar information, but for the commercial services. And so the same trucks that will operate for residential sidearm are doing double duty, if you will, on the commercial side. And then that same rear loader, in addition to working the alleys, will also be able to pick up the green bends that you'll see around town because your truck is configured to be able to operate that way. And then Gene was good enough last week to take a picture of what was happening with throughout the city as far as the whiteout and the collection of city facilities. So this slide gives our analysis of what we see as your collection routing requirements. And so at the very top, it shows what the 90-gallon sidearms are. So that's divided between the 2 residential routes. And then your 300-gallon sidearms are providing a combination of services, like we said a few minutes ago, between some residential, some commercial, some alley, and then some backup on the residential side. And then the last one shows the rear loader. And so, again, this speaks to the kind of the ingenuity and creativity that the city takes in terms of, if you look under the row that's titled current collection routes, when you sum up all of those, it adds up to 4. So that's where there are the 4 routes, but each route, each driver is having to provide services across a variety of efforts each day. So that takes a lot of significant efforts and coordination. And so what we do at Burns and McDonnell is to evaluate from a time and motion perspective, what's our opinion of how many routes are required for each of these services. So that next row shows that. And what's important to communicate is that it's our opinion that right now the city really needs closer to 4.6 routes each day or each week to provide the services. So right now, the city is really getting by, making do with just 4. So how does that happen? Again, it's a lot of that really hard work and dedication, where you will have a supervisor recognize, hey, we've got to make sure everything gets collected, and we'll hop in a truck and pick up a route, and just a lot of helping each other out. But it's really important to have your operation properly sized. And so we are recommending that the city add another route, so that would then allow you to catch up and then have, call it about a half a route for additional growth. So you would have 5, you need 4.6. So that gives you roughly another 0.4 to absorb future growth.
Maybe we'll stop. Is there any questions on that? Because that's actually a really important slide. You can go back maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. When it comes to the routes and the drivers driving the route, how do you make up for a holiday? Because I mean, you're not collecting on the holiday. What it just pushes it, because I know I'm normally on a Wednesday.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so if the holiday's on Monday, so Monday's route is collected on Tuesday instead, and then we collect on Saturday.
Oh,
So we really just extends it a day as a part of that.
Okay.
And really, it depends on whether the landfill is open or not open, because we really can't haul if the landfill is closed. So we coordinate our days off for the solid waste department with the landfill part. And then a lot of times in that, we'll come in on a Saturday or Sunday sometimes to make sure we're getting the commercial and alleys customers collected, because there's just significant amount of solid waste generated that's a little bit different for commercial than your residential. So sometimes we just don't want solid waste overflowing onto the ground. So we're going to come in on we know for our customers that have a lot of trash, we come in on the weekends when we have holidays off. So what I wanted to kind of go over is, you can see that we've got a little bit of space there on our residential route for the 90 sidearm, but we're over capacity in the 300 gallons for the residential primary, commercial, and residential secondary. So that's what's happening, is we're backfilling that hole right now. But as we start to grow in our commercial 90s and we start to expand our services to the west and the north, that 0.46 will, slowly reduce, and it'll start to get, we'll start to gain more customers, and we won't have that capability to support the other services that we're providing. So that's kind of where it comes to.
I'm just curious, and maybe I missed it, but what's the measurement to determine whether you're above or under? Is it like the route is you were supposed to conduct in certain number of hours, and you're pushing that hours, and you're going over a half hour every day, and that sort of thing that determines you don't have enough capacity?
Yeah, so we actually evaluate that based on what we call a time and motion basis. So when I was talking earlier about the time that we spent doing the field observations, that's where we're literally following the city's trucks for several days to collect data on everything from what's the average amount of time that it takes to go from the service yard out to the various first service location, which can vary depending on where that is in the city. But then how much time does it take to service the different types of customers, which is going to be different, whether it's a 90-gallon container for residents as compared to either the alley or the different types of commercial services. So we'll collect all that data, and then we'll develop a detailed spreadsheet that will then estimate what our opinion is on how many collections should be able to be done on a daily basis, and then by multiplying that by the number of containers that are in need, as well as the number of trips that need to be made to the landfill, then we're able to provide our opinion about how many routes are needed on a per day basis.
Okay, thank you.
Just a question on the numbers here, and maybe you said it and I missed it. This is based on the volume that we have today, not necessarily the future online that's coming down the pipe of construction of apartments and housing.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
Is that correct? Just a
that's-
snapshot today. So with all the stuff that we've approved, it's gonna push this even higher.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, which is exactly part of the reason where, if you add that next route, it'll give you at least some additional room for growth. But to your point, there may be a need to continue looking at that into the future. And that's actually another really good point that I didn't mention this earlier, but but with your comment there, for these, some of these are for commercial in terms of this is commercial and alley, and then over here, this rear loader is also commercial and alley, so that those are over capacity. We're going to talk a little bit later about the question of whether the city should enter the front load dumpster collection business. And so we'll explain exactly what that would entail. But I think that really speaks to what you're getting at in terms of, hey, there's a lot of growth that's occurring. And then if you would add another operation, that could better prepare the city to take on some of that future growth.
Okay, thank you.
But any other questions to this point?
Actually, I think one more good point, since we're talking through that, is we do have our, in the rear loader, we do our alley collection, which takes up time and is a service we provide. So keep that in mind as we further our conversation, because it's one of our alternatives that we're going to discuss.
Okay.
So this just, again, recaps several of those operations and then provides some key considerations. So on the sidearm, over on the left-hand side, like we just talked about, there's a need to add that route there, which could meet current needs, but then also provide for some additional growth. And then, like we talked about a moment ago, for both the alley sidearm and the commercial sidearm, those routes are over capacity, but by expanding the curbside sidearm, that could provide some benefits to that as well. And then, as we just talked about on the commercial rear load, those are over capacity as well. And so that's where taking a look at, would it make sense to consider a front load operation is part of the reason why that's a part of this master planning effort. So that's what we wanted to communicate on the operational analysis in terms of the baseline. And now I'm going to start talking about our analysis on the financial front. So any other questions about the operational work? Okay. So as part of this master plan,
Do you have a
sorry.
question, Jed?
Just a curiosity question. How much is each 300-gallon can or barrel, whatever you call them, and 90-gallon? How much are they individually, and the big commercial bins? What's the cost of those?
Well, we actually will have, in terms of what the annual assessment is.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we have a slide that'll show that in just a few minutes. If I could,
Okay.
if you're okay, we
And
can show
actually,
that
to
to you then.
purchase those units?
Oh, the actual cost of the
Yes.
container itself?
Yes.
Yeah, Gene, is that, do you have a?
We can get back to you. It's changed. We've had a lot of increases. We just got some 300-gallon cans are on order, and then we've got some bins. So we'll have to get back to you with some accurate numbers for that.
Just a curiosity question. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so the comment there is those costs have gone up pretty significantly, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes, but that's kind of a trend of what we're seeing not just in the overall economy, but it's definitely hitting the solid waste industry pretty hard as well. So as part of this master plan, it includes a comprehensive cost of service analysis. And so what that means is similar to the level of detail that we were describing on the operational analysis. We're undertaking a just as detailed, if not more so, evaluation of the financial system here within the city. And so This slide here is a kind of a deeper dive in communicating our methodology for doing that. So spent a lot of time evaluating the data that's been received, and then multiple discussions with city staff to understand and to evaluate that information. And then in terms of the cost of service, what we do there is we take the city's budget and then we evaluate what type of adjustments need to be made to that budget so that it's reflective of a normal or a typical year. And that's what we call in the rate making business a test year revenue requirement. So the test year is intended to be that typical and normal year. And then a revenue requirement is just how much revenue do you need to generate to meet all of your expenses. So then once we do that, we then allocate all of those costs out to the main services that are provided. And that's how we're able to, and we'll show you our preliminary assessment of that, of what the costs are for each of the different services that are provided, be it residential or the various commercial services, and are you either under or over recovering what you need, which would then indicate to what extent is there going to be a need to increase your assessment going forward. And ultimately, what we want to do is to work with the city to develop cost of service driven rates, and so the master plan will include rate recommendations along those lines. So this next slide just gives you a more graphic representation of that middle box from the prior slide in terms of the cost of service analysis. So looking at the top is where we take those gross revenue requirements or the city's budget. Then we make adjustments so that, again, it's reflective of a typical year. That's the basis for the test year revenue requirement. And then what we have done with Kalispell is to allocate costs based on these categories that you see here. So we have annual evaluations of what the cost is for each one of these different categories. And then we're able to then, as appropriate, group these categories together to then form the basis of your customer classes. And that's how we're able to say, here's what the annual cost is for providing residential or the various types of commercial services. Does that all make sense? Or anybody have any questions there? And so we're doing this not just for the test year, but this master plan is looking out at least 10 years. And so we're developing a forecast out through the year 2035. And so in doing that, we've developed a series of customized inflation factors, and those are shown in that green table on the left-hand side. We have already factored in the need for that one new operator and sidearm collection vehicle that we mentioned earlier. But I think it's also just important to keep in mind, and this is shown in the graph on the right-hand side, is that traditionally, and this goes back for 10 plus years in this chart, if you look at just the two lines on that graph, the light blue is the increases in the cost of the solid waste industry over that time frame, and then the green is just the regular CPI, Consumer Price Index. So you can see that the cost of it's actually called the Garbage and Trash Index has significantly exceeded the cost of regular CPI historically. And so I think that's just really important to keep in mind when you look at what the annual inflation percentages are that we have in the table on the left-hand side, that we feel that it's really important to include those types of numbers, because history tells us that those percentages are going to exceed what typical inflation has been. Any questions on that?
What's in within the blue or the light blue index, does that include landfill, or is that just the collection and transportation?
Right.
So disposal of?
Yeah, the name of this index it's actually called the Garbage and Trash Index, and it's collected, the data is by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, so the same group that does the regular CPI. And they actually do a survey of customers in terms of what they're paying on their bills. So virtually all of those will include the cost of collection and disposal. Now, that's not the case here in Kalispell because the city, you all only pay for the collection and then the county separately handles the cost of landfill. But, yeah, it's probably somewhere in the very high 90% range that these costs include both collection and disposal. Any other questions? Another key aspect of this is, as part of that 10-year forecasting, is to look at your capital improvement plan or CIP. And so we've built out an entire spreadsheet that is kind of briefly summarized on this slide, just to give you a sense of what some of the key future expenses are going to be. So a number of these are for future vehicles. I will mention that it was only 2 or 3 years ago that many cities, including Kalispell, were paying about $275,000 for these trucks, which is still a lot. But now those costs have increased to about $450,000. So when we say that the costs are hitting the solid waste industry pretty hard, this is a really good example of that. And this is a photograph of the building in which the vehicles are stored overnight. So as you can see, it's pretty jam-packed with these trucks. And so if the city is going to add more vehicles in the future for growth, there is going to be a need to expand this building, and the city has estimated that cost to be about $800,000. And so in our forecast and working with the city, we've tried to allocate these costs and to depreciate these costs based on their useful lives. So in the case of the housing expansion, that's going to assume 20 years of debt. And then for the vehicles, for some of them, it's going to be based on a debt funding over a 5-year period. But for the most part, what we are including in the financial analysis is the continuation of the city setting aside what was previously $150,000 per year, and we're recommending that increase to $200,000 because of the increases in the costs of the vehicles. But by doing that, you're able to have a more steady allocation or contribution for that vehicle equipment, so that you don't see wild swings from 1 year to the next. I will mention that the city has been able to actually have its fleet replacement life be at 12 years, which is really pretty exceptional. We see so many of our clients that are much closer to a 6 to 8 year replacement cycle. And especially given the challenging conditions that you have in the wintertime here, I think that's worth noting. And that's going to be even more important going forward when you recognize how much more expensive these trucks are becoming.
Yeah.
Was there, Chad had a question.
So when you have the replacement trucks in 27, 28, and 28, so the current truck that you're replacing, does it then move into a replacement truck? And then the truck that was in replacement, does it get sold? Or do we just keep getting replacement trucks?
Yeah,
and where does that
that's
money go?
Yeah, that's the exact idea, is to take what was the primary to then move that to a backup role. And then the backup, if it's, by that point, it's probably at the end of its life, and then to sell that as salvage.
Does the money that comes in from the sale of the eventual truck that gets sold, does that go into the depreciation fund, or does it go
It
against
does
the
come back
purchase?
into the fund, yeah.
Oh,
Yep,
okay.
and we do bring that right back into the equipment line item, yep.
Ah.
Yep.
Any other questions? So this is the slide from the question that was asked earlier about what is some of the current costs as well as the assessments. I will mention, before we get into any of the numbers here, I did want to draw your attention to that blue bar at the bottom of the slide, which is that our financial analysis with the city is ongoing, and it will be refined throughout the assessment review. And one of the key things that we're working with the city on right now is just to better hone in on the number of customers that are being serviced in the city with the city, with it being an open market. Those customers will change from time to time, and also with growth. And so that's something that is ongoing. And so I don't necessarily expect the overall cost of our analysis to change. We feel very comfortable with that. But the number of customers is still something that we're collaborating with the city to refine. So, yeah, it may be when we come back in March or even in 3 weeks that these numbers may get tweaked, and so that would be the primary reason for that. But what this is showing now is in our analysis, we'll ultimately go out for the 10 years, but just for the sake of giving you all some more digestible information, we're showing this just for the next 3 years. And so this is showing what the annual cost per household is. So for fiscal year 25, as an example, is about $156 per household for the year. Your assessment is $141. So that means that there is an under recovery of about $15 per household. Now this cost of service number of the 156 is divided by the total number of households. So if there are adjustments in the number of households, that actual cost of service will change on a per household basis. And then over on the right-hand side is where it communicates how those costs are divvied up. So earlier, where we talked about how we've allocated the costs into the different categories, this shows what those categories are. And so it's all of the residential collection, the alley cleanup, public education, spring cleanup, and then the proportion of the cost that residential is responsible for the transfers and administration. And the transfers and administration categories are also summarized in the bottom left-hand corner of this slide, because there's a lot that goes into that, everything from IT to transfers to the central garage, as well as various other support services within the city. So any questions on this one? Yes.
This is just residential. We're moving on to commercial next.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
I think one thing to point out is as we do these breakouts, you'll see that we just have different cost within our residential breakdown. So our alley cleanup, we can actually put a number to the cost that we provide for alley cleanup. And again, I'm just gonna hold on to that thought as we bring in, because we're gonna ask you questions about alley cleanup. At this time, alley cleanup is offered to our alley customers once a week, and we're in there collecting debris for our alley customers. For our rollout customers, we offer a once a year spring cleanup, and we also have a breakout of what that cost is. So again, we're going to circle back to that, but just important note on those breakouts.
Yes, definitely a good sense of what is to come. And then also the way that these slides are structured, to your question that you asked a moment ago, is that this one is on residential, and then we have multiple slides that will be on commercial, and then other similar services that we want to talk about that are structured the same way. So we have two on commercial. So this one is for the 300 and 400 gallon customers. So then you can see at the top what that cost of service is, and then there is a different assessment depending on whether you're a 300 or a 400 gallon customer. And then whereas we are showing presently that there's an under recovery for residential, for commercial we are showing that there is an over recovery, again with the same caveat that the financial analysis is ongoing and is going to be refined throughout the process. So some of these numbers may get updated. But it is relatively typical within the solid waste industry to see more revenue coming in from your commercial customers and a lower amount of revenue on the residential side. And I think from a policy perspective, that's important for you all as the council to understand and have that appreciation, because I think it oftentimes becomes a policy decision in terms of while we want to recommend cost to service based rates, there can be times when the commercial sector is supporting some of your residential customers as well. So this next slide, where this one is for the 300 gallon and 400 gallon commercial. This one is for the commercial customers that are serviced with what is a 2 cubic yard bin or dumpster type container. So on this one, again, shows the same type of information. And again, this analysis is ongoing and subject to being updated, but right now are showing that the green bins are actually not generating sufficient revenue levels to pay for their costs. So then this next one is financial analysis that has been included as part of the study to look at what are the costs of additional city services that are provided that really benefit everyone in the Kalispell community and not just the residents or businesses that receive service from the city of Kalispell. So City of Kalispell, I think, really embraces the open market nature of services, so that whether you're a business or you're a resident in the city, you have that right to choose who your service provider is. And so the city, I think, is very comfortable with that arrangement. But there are a number of services that really benefit the entire community, regardless of whether you receive your services from the city of Kalispell. And so that's communicated over in the pie chart. So that's for services like city facilities, animal removal, removal of abandoned vehicles, support for the downtown association, litter abatement, and then their relative percentage of the transfer and administrative costs. So all in, that's about $76,000 per year. And so what we've calculated here is if you would charge that to just the customers that are City of Kalispell customers currently, that would be about $11.82 per year. Whereas if you would allocate those costs to all of the parcels within the city, that would be about a little over $7 per household per year. And so this is something that, again, we consider to be a policy discussion for the city. I will mention that this $76,000 is not included in any of the other costs that we had talked about. And so it's not factored in to those other numbers. And so you all would need to essentially make a decision on how would you want to move forward to recover that $76,000. And as Susie mentioned, it's one of the very last slides. We'll cover, here's what all the key policy topics are that we would want you to weigh in on. So we'll be coming back to that later, but certainly if you have any questions or comments about this now, I'd be happy to talk about that.
Yeah, and if I may just touch on that a little bit, we faced the same thing in our light assessment 8 years ago, 7, 8, 9.
When we did the light assessment
Yeah.
update.
Where we were talking about like downtown lights, parking lights in the parks, lights that benefited for the entire community. They weren't born across every parcel. They're only those that had the actual assessment. So a policy decision at that time was if you were within so many feet of a light pole, street light, then you were assessed the full. If you weren't, normally and previously you hadn't been assessed at all, but those additional costs you still benefited from even though you weren't paying for. So at that time, council made the policy decision to then everyone would be charged X % to cover those costs that did benefit everyone. So we changed the lighting assessment, is similar to what would be here if it's a cost per parcel for those expenses that otherwise wouldn't be captured. So we tackled this type of concept before.
So what's the current setup for the funding of these?
If you receive service,
Our current customers
are paying for it.
paying for this.
Oh, gotcha.
For everyone, and those that don't receive service, even though technically they're receiving the benefit, don't pay for any of it.
Gotcha.
What were the green bins one more time? Green bins?
The green bins, they're the 2-yard, right? 2-yard green bins that are collected. Our rear loader will collect them, so
They're
commercial
the
surfaces.
the metal
yeah,
ones that roll out.
Yeah, they roll
Got it.
out, so yeah,
Okay,
connect to the back and then dump in.
got it.
Any other questions on this or anything else?
Well, I guess the question that I would have is, we're talking about this as an assessment. So currently, it goes out as a rate. Just,
No, it's picked up annually, and I think if we have individual ones, they may hit as a rate.
It would be, it's a annual rate, but you pay it on your taxes twice a year, so it's just divided by 2. So it goes on your tax bill. Your solid waste
Okay.
is your tax bill, so it'd be billed the same way, just be
Got it.
every parcel instead of just our solid waste customers.
okay.
And,
So-
to deep dive into city facilities are solid waste collections at City Hall, the firehouse, the police station, the city shop complex. I think we have 5 different parks that we collect for. And that's why it's so substantial. It just starts to add up after a while for that.
So if we didn't do it, obviously we'd be paying somebody else to do it.
We
So
would
that's
still,
the
we would still
benefit to
put
it.
that amount of a cost into the residential and customer rate. So it would have to get calculated in somehow because we do provide the service.
So is the current, what this recommendation would have customers that use the service and don't use the service pay the same amount?
Yes,
For this
Just for
particular-
that
just for this.
breakout of the, like the city facilities, the animal removal, not the same amount for a residential service that they don't get.
So in the residential service, we're keeping the same where you pay if you have the service?
Correct.
Okay.
And what's the downtown association? What's the service we're providing there?
Solid waste within the
Within
garbage cans along the downtown. I don't know if we
Yep,
pick up
we
anything
pay
additional.
for personnel, so to collect during the summertime, and then we collect the solid waste personnel collects during the wintertime.
Oh, these are like the downtown cans.
Yep, yep,
Okay.
yep. So, yeah, we have an agreement, the city of Kalispell has an agreement with the downtown association that, and as a part of that agreement, we pay for personnel to collect the trash, a BID staff to collect the trash.
Anything else on this one? So we also wanted to bring to your attention that the city does have a key financial policy, and that is to maintain a solid waste fund balance that's equal to 40% of your annual operating expenditures. And given how extensive your operations are from a collections perspective, we think that's a good percentage. I mean, just think about how expensive the collection vehicles are. Hopefully this would never happen here, but we've had other cities we've worked for that have unfortunately had trucks that have burnt up overnight and can be a complete loss. And so if you've got to look at replacing one or more garbage trucks, if you don't have reserves in place, that can be a real challenge. And so to have, as part of your key rate design considerations, this is, I think, another important policy perspective, and that is, we've talked about this a little bit, that ideally you want to have as much rate equity as you can between your different customers, be it residential and commercial. But like I said earlier, it is fairly common to also have commercial rates that will support residential operations. So it doesn't mean that has to continue here in Kalispell, but you know, is something that is done in other cities across the country. So on a preliminary basis, this slide just gives you a sense of what would happen if you would not have any additional rate assessments out in the future. And this is going out a full 10 years in this case. And so to explain that, what this is showing is the dark gray line that goes across the top. That's your 40% policy. So right now it's a little over $500,000 and increases from there. And then the blue line that starts in the upper left and then goes down to the bottom right, that's the amount of cash that you presently have in place. So presently, you do have enough of a fund balance to hit your reserves. And this is very, very typical when we do these types of studies. But if you don't have any additional assessments, you're not going to keep up with future inflation. And by the year 2026, you would then not be within your policy, and then you would run out of reserves in about close to between 27 and 28, and then you would go into a negative position thereafter, because what this is showing, and again, these are preliminary numbers, is that your net income, which is shown by the light blue, so that's essentially when you factor in all of your expenses and then subtract from that your assessment, you're not generating sufficient revenue amounts into the future. So again, this is very common. You know, this is why you need to do these types of studies, because this identifies how much additional revenue would need to be generated out into the future. So we haven't gotten to the point of projecting out what those recommendations will be, since we're still relatively early in the process, but we wanted to at least bring this to your attention so that you're aware of this. Yes.
Is fiscal year 2028 so much larger because of those two replacement trucks, or?
Yeah, it's largely those trucks.
Yep,
is
yep,
exactly
it's the capital equipment.
Yep. And that's where for most years, we're trying to smooth that out, but that's a good example of why when you have to buy those trucks and where they will have more of a fiscal impact, you see it there.
And this is just using cash to buy. No consequences for financing, interest costs built into rates or anything
Although
like that.
it is a combination where a lot of the vehicles will be purchased with cash from your equipment reserve fund, but in some cases, there will be some debt utilized as well.
There is, yeah,
So-
two pieces of equipment were debt.
Yeah, so it's just trying to create a good blend of that to meet the fiscal needs of the city going forward. Yeah, so it's definitely an important slide here. Any other questions about it? And again, much more to come on the financial analysis as well as potential recommendations. But what we want to do now is talk about the various service alternatives that could be considered. And one that the city asked us to start to evaluate is the potential expansion of service. So I mentioned this a few minutes ago, where the city is in a competitive environment where there are other companies who are certainly welcome to and are providing service in Kalispell. But just on a very hypothetical basis, the city did want us to evaluate, while we're not anticipating it, what would be the requirements if, say, other haulers on the residential side would exit the Kalispell market. So again, just to be very clear, it's very hypothetical. We're not anticipating that would happen, but with this being a 10-year plus master plan, we think it's important for the city to have that information, just that should that need ever exist. And so That's what we have started to evaluate. And so again, if there would not be any other active haulers, we would anticipate there'd be a need to service an additional approximately 3,500 customers. So that would be a combination as shown on this map in the white area of infill areas, as well as in the pink and black of areas that are expanding or presently do not have services. And so this would require the addition of one more route, so another frontline truck and driver. And then you would also need to purchase carts for those customers. And then you would need to look at additional expansion to that solid waste building as well. So again, not anything that's being anticipated, but just to be able to have an understanding of what the financial and operational requirements of that would be. That'll be included as part of the master plan. And so this financial analysis is still ongoing, and we'll be developing those costs over the coming weeks. Any questions about this?
I'll just clarify for my mind, you're talking like Evergreen Disposal, or if Waste Management or Republic or one of them came in, that's what you're saying?
Well, if one of them would just say, hey, we're not going to service this market in the future.
Okay,
If they would decide to exit the market.
okay.
And again, we're not anticipating that whatsoever. Again, more on a hypothetical basis, but if they would ever say,
Okay.
hey, we can make more money if we go over to Missoula or Bozeman or wherever, and they decide to leave Kalispell, just for you to have an understanding of what your requirements would be.
So not necessarily our customers exiting and going to them, but them going and moving somewhere else.
Yeah,
Okay,
That
Just-
those haulers saying, we're gonna leave Kalispell.
okay.
I think an important thing to note too, I was just talking to PJ Sorensen, our senior planner, and he was letting me know that we might have to do some master planning for the new land use policies that we're implementing. So we'll be looking at that to make sure that our planning efforts for solid waste also incorporate the requirements of the new land use plans. So, he was just talking to me about that today, so it was good timing on those.
Anything else on this one? So then in addition to that, there are 4 other alternative service approaches that we wanted to share with you all this evening, and those are listed here, and we'll go through those individually. A couple of them, Susie or myself have alluded to in the first 2 in terms of the yard trimmings and bulky item collection, as well as front load. But then we also want to talk about a couple of other topics, such as would it make sense to provide multiple cart sizes for your residential customers? And then to what extent is there an opportunity for changes to your recycling program here in Kalispell? So on the yard trimmings and bulky item collection, we've talked about this a little bit, but this is such an important topic. I want to make sure that everybody has a good understanding of what the service levels are. So across the board, the city does provide a pretty high level of service for the collection of yard trimmings as well as bulky items. So these would be the materials that cannot fit inside of your carts. So that could be a sofa, or in the case of this picture, more brush type materials. So if you're in a house that has an alley, the city will be there every week and pretty much pick up whatever gets set out. Whereas if you live in a house where you're serviced with a rolling 90-gallon cart, there you receive just the once per year spring cleanup. And so the alley customers are definitely receiving a higher level of service than your curbside customers. And then the costs of servicing the alleys is somewhat compounded by illegal dumping from county residents. And it's also just, because we deal with this issue with a number of our other clients, it's just really hard to kind of crack that code from an enforcement type perspective. The spring cleanup, it only happens once a year, but I think just about everybody within the city staff in Kalispell has an important role in making sure that program goes off without a hitch. When we were here back in June, we were talking to people and just seems like everybody had a hand in making that a successful program. So it's, on one hand, it's, you know, it shows that can-do attitude for the city staff, but on the other hand, it's a real challenge to pull people away from what they're usually doing, you know, the other, say, 51 weeks or so out of the year. But this creates overall a number of policy issues for the city to consider in terms of, do you want to continue these different levels of service, as well as charging your customers the same dollar amounts as part of their annual assessments, or do you want to look at potential changes? And so what we're planning to evaluate as part of the master plan are these alternative collection services for both alley and spring cleanup, subject to any kind of feedback or direction that we get from you all this evening. But for alley, we were looking to evaluate how would a system look in which you provide collection 4 times per year, which we still think is a relatively high level of service, but definitely not the same as what your residents have now. But in order to do that, you're definitely going to have increased efforts and need to invest in education, outreach, as well as compliance for anybody that does not properly set out those materials. And then you can, if you do that, hopefully have a level of service that's more consistent with the rates that are being charged. And then for those residents that currently have the spring cleanup, what we are looking to evaluate there is to provide collection instead of once a year, to do that twice per year, once in the spring and then again in the fall. So it wouldn't be exactly the same levels of service, but it would be much closer than compared to what it is now. So not perfect, but we think definitely on the right track. But with that, would definitely be interested to hear any perspective or any questions you have.
Well, I guess my question then would be to you two that kind of know this. Well, thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for coming.
Hit their hour marker.
This gets better. You should stick
This is riveting, guys.
You're gonna miss the exciting conclusion.
Who forgot the popcorn?
Carrie's got her hand, okay.
So my question is within the alley collection where it's every week, are you seeing that it's truly being utilized in that way that it needs to be done every week?
It's always utilized.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
I mean, as long as it's being utilized, right? It's
Yeah, no,
It's just normal.
yeah,
no,
it's-
I don't.
It's terrible.
It's a service that's been provided in Kalispell for decades. So
Okay.
it's a known service that the alley customers use on a weekly basis.
Okay. Because I think of it, I don't live on an alley. I get it the one time a year for spring cleanup, and it's an amazing thing. I wish it could happen more often, right, in the neighborhood. So I guess just my thought on that.
Carrie,
It's kind of like
you
the-
were once at Carrie's on them. Carrie's had her hand up, so.
Oh, thank you, Your Honor. I had it up before and I don't think it was seen, so I have a few questions. Should I wait for the end with the ones that are not relevant to this topic?
Yeah, let's do that, because we'll have more questions if you want, Carrie. I think that would be good.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
about that, Terry.
So what my question is currently is, I get that we've been doing it this way for a really long time in Kalispell. The citizens that don't have alley pickup are paying the same price as those who have alley pickup. So why would we only offer that to folks that have an alley pickup? Or I guess it's just why? Why do we continue doing that when we're not giving that same service to those that don't have an alley?
Yeah, I think that's the question we're proposing to council and are going to seek direction of what council wants to do going into the future.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
It may not be county garbage coming into the alleys.
Right, it could be
That was-
me.
yeah.
Part of the challenge is to know where that
Yeah,
is coming
it
from.
could be city garbage coming into, yeah, it could be.
You see that orange Tacoma driving down alleys, stopping now and then, I'm sorry. Jessica,
Okay. So in the hospital system, we call that the sacred cow. Just because you've done it one way, this way forever, doesn't mean that you have to do it that way forever. So that's how I feel about that. And what do other cities do? Is this like our weekly alley pickup? Is this a common thing that other cities do in the alleys, or are we just
I have no idea.
special?
Is it?
Yeah, well, there's such a wide variety of how brush and bulky services are provided and levels of service. There are some cities that are still doing it as you have in Kalispell on a weekly basis, whereas other cities have made changes to go to a less frequent collection system. But making these types of changes, I know you were saying, just because it's a sacred cow doesn't mean you have to continue it that way. This will probably be an area that your residents will be pretty interested in understanding. And so making these types of changes, can definitely be an important focus of this master plan.
you thought one-way traffic on 3rd and 4th converting as two-way was a lot of phone calls?
I hear that, but I also live on an alley, and it is absolutely amazing how much garbage is just piled everywhere on the alleys. It is gross. It's really gross. It just lays everywhere. They don't like, the thing will be empty and they'll just lay the garbage right there on the ground. And it's like, wow. I mean, maybe there needs to be some public education out there about that, because they can't even get it in the can. And so, like, I look out my back window and there's just garbage everywhere. And I don't know if is that ubiquitous throughout the city? Yeah?
Yeah, yep.
It's ugly. So I would say let's just do one time a year, spring cleanup for the alley people. If nobody else is getting that service and we're all paying the same thing. I hear you, Mark. I hear you.
It's called respect and it's lacking.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't want to be devil's advocate, but if the service isn't provided, I know that one of the things, the reason that it's been maintained as a service is, to keep the community clean. The service, allows us to keep the community clean in a way. So just something to keep consideration. Whatever direction you're going to give us is the way we're going to go. It's just some things to think of. If the service isn't provided, what the consequence might be eventually.
We should form like a
Duly
citywide
noted.
HOA to cover this. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Your Honor. So it kind of goes to what I was going to say. It almost feels like that being done every week, because an alley is a confined space. If you're talking about what you're talking about with it being as bad as it is, imagine if it wasn't done once a week. Or on the flip side, going through and putting that out for your curbside customers, what would that look like if every week during trash pickup, people were bringing their oversized stuff and just laying it out next? So then you got a cleanliness, unsightly look that way too on our city streets. In the alleyways, it's in the alleys. But I feel like it almost seems like maybe this was something years ago that was put into place to go and keep the clutter from, adding up in the alley, so you can get through it, so services could get through it. Now the one thing is, if people expect it now, so that is a discussion. It's something they've always done. They expect it. What do you do with that? It rivals parking.
Yeah. You can do what everybody else in the commercial world is doing and just assign them a subscription fee to continue. Say if you want your alley cleanup, it's gonna cost you this much more. I mean, you're really letting some residents have a massive amount more trash pickup per week than you are for others. And, you know, I'm not a big equity guy, but if it's going to cost us that much more, I saw the 125% that's on the alley pickup. Then it's, you know, it's like, you know, the rest of the ratepayers they're not ratepayers, but the rest of the people that are paying for that service are actually subsidizing those guys, right?
I cannot imagine losing this service.
Okay.
I
Carrie?
cannot imagine losing this service. Oops.
Go ahead, Jed.
People have become used to it. I agree with Susie. It does keep our town clean. I have a couple apartments by me. One of them doesn't even have a car to haul their own garbage. I think we would end up with a lot more trash and a lot more problems in areas. I kind of get your point, Sid, of those who get this service may have to pay a different fee or something else. But Susie, I think you're spot on. This keeps Kalispell clean by having this service in much of the areas of Kalispell.
Did you have a question?
Carrie?
Thank you, Your Honor. I agree with what you're saying there, Jed. However, it's hard for me to justify for my constituents who don't have alleys to pay the same rate that folks that have alleys are paying. That's my point number one. My point number two is, and I believe Mayor Johnson was on the solid waste committee for the county when the system was implemented where you get a punch card for X amount of trips that don't cost you anything to take your yard waste to the dump. So we all get that. So we can all take our stuff there however many times a year it is. My third point is the company I work for is in the county, and we use a different, use Evergreen Disposal, I believe. And if our lid will not shut tightly, if you can even see trash in the bag, in the bin, we get fined. So you can't overstuff your can. You have to, and they skipped us last week because they couldn't get to us because of the streets and the county roads. And do you think we get a credit back because of that? No. We're allowed to have an extra bag or so on the ground for this pickup coming up. So a company like mine that produces a lot of trash it's stinky trash because it's a vet clinic. You know, if we don't get picked up for a week, guess who gets to go to the dump to take the trash? That would be me. So I don't know what the solution is to fix it, but I think we need to really evaluate the service we are providing and make sure that everyone is getting the same level of service. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Fisher?
If this is done, we're going to end up with a bunch of rodent problems because people are going to have their 1980 pickup in the backyard. They're going to stack 500 bags of of garbage back there. Birds are going to get into it. Mice are going to come in. It's going to stink because they've become used to it. Okay, I get the fee discussion, but to take away the service will have many people just say, by golly, I'm going to roll into the dump. I'm either too busy or don't have the time, what have you, and it's going to get hauled every 2 months, and it's going to become a complaint that you hear of a lot by certain people near me now for garbage and waste in their yard in the back of their truck. People do become used to a level of service. Let them decide, or make a fee adjustment. I feel fortunate to have this service. And I get your point on people still stack by this, and it's gotten worse because, like I say, people have moved into apartments. There's probably 10 more people on the block than there used to be. But take this service away, and it's going to get very trashy.
Go back to rates again. So if I don't have an alley, what do I pay for my garbage?
I fixed.
Yeah, Susie will take us back to that slide. Because so the cost for the alley part of it is roughly, was that $14
$14.80.
So when I pay
Really
for my garbage,
is
I'm
a-
paying the same rate that someone with an alley is.
Yeah.
Right.
So why would I pay for, I mean, load it on to the people who have the cost. So those who get the front yard service with once a week, here's your fee. We got the routes. It's not that hard. This is the service you're getting. You pay for it.
Yeah, so we could make a rate structure where we would assess for alley cleanup. So we could just make a separate rate structure for that.
Right. For those people that live with alleys. They get the service, they have it, they pay for it, and
But I do
That is
see your
potential.
vehicle coming down my alley.
I'll get a different one. Jessica?
Is there more concentration of pickup in the like houses in the alley areas than there is in other areas, or are they all like?
It's just,
Then-
it's a once a week collection.
But are there more houses per like acre in like the areas with alleys than there is?
More dense, yeah.
Is it more dense?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, it depends on the neighborhood.
Yeah, it probably does depend on the
It
neighborhood,
fills
but
up way before they come.
What'd you say?
it probably does depend on the neighborhood also.
Because there's some fairly dense, Silverbrook is a little
Oh, not
more
Silver-
dense,
yeah.
but that's not as dense, but there's some others that have more density. I mean, it's, oh my gosh.
I wasn't done.
Gotta be done with that.
She was.
Yeah, you're not done yet, Jessica.
Carrie, for you, I mean, when you have your rules for your evergreen pickup, I mean, you don't break those rules then, right?
Nope.
Because you know when you break those rules, then there's consequences.
Correct.
Let's make something clear. There's typically 2 bins per alley. It's not like everybody has their own. Numerous neighbors are sharing a bin. They typically fill up within the first few days of the service of once a week. Mine's every Wednesday. Typically, most times of year, it's full by Monday. People are beginning the stuff of trash stacking around the bin, but not each homeowner gets their own bin. It's shared amongst many people. You have
It's a shared bin.
2 per alley. Is that kind of normal?
Depends on the alley and the density that surrounds the alley, so it'd be hard to say a typical, right? So it could be 2, 3, 4. I don't know, have we got any fivers?
How big are those bins, Susie?
300 gallon. We
And
used to
mine
have
is
400
90.
gallons, and then we reduced down to 300 gallons because the 400s were too heavy for the trucks.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's like group projects in school.
So
You had the guy who didn't do anything and it cost everybody. You got the A for your hard work, or you all suffered.
So typically in the alleys, we go through and we assess the houses. So if there's one house, that's 100 gallons, just like we would a residential. So we look at that, and if we go, there's 12 houses, that's 1,200 gallons. So we'll have, 4 300-gallon containers in there.
yeah, so we try to make it equitable residential, so you still have your 90 gallons worth of volume to put your trash in
Okay,
weekly.
here it goes back to my original
Not a
question.
perfect system because the alleys are only, you can only put so many cans in an alley, but we do our best.
Okay, so here goes, if I may. Here goes back to my original question, how much each different size container is. Perhaps it's more of a commercial one on each block that can be picked up instead of so many to pick up if the cost difference isn't that much. When I was in Cutbank fishing, I heard that a grocery cart costs $800 per cart and they have them stolen all the time. And that's a huge loss. I, first of all, never thought a grocery cart was worth that much. But how much is a big commercial bin versus the 90 you say, and then the 300 gallon? Maybe it's more dispersed service with a larger one. People actually walk a little ways and have a quicker service for the city to come in and pick up more of a commercial unit every 2 blocks away. Or maybe people wouldn't even walk that far because they probably
Heavens to
barely
Betsy,
make
no,
it to.
because I get a perfect example in my alley.
Block to go to the bank.
Okay, and that's a shame. But I believe with all my heart, if this is taken away and/or the people aren't given a chance to pay a little more, it's going to make neighborhoods a total disaster that we'll pay for in another way. It will be blight. It will take away something that people have become very, very used to.
We'll have to hire Dr. Fauci for the Black Plague.
Raccoons need a place to live too.
But it's gonna create that. It'll be mice, birds, crows, seagulls. It will be a crap show, a total crap show,
Your Honor,
literally.
You have to buy a cat.
1 second, Carrie.
I just have a quick point. So now with 382 and we have ADUs by right and we double our capacity, that means we're going to be doubling our trash cans in the alleys. Right?
We're gonna have difficulties in having enough trash containers to service the
Okay.
amount of residents that are on those. And some of that just goes down to people don't want large trash containers next to their driveway or
Correct.
next to their garage or next to their house window. It's a very challenging service sometimes on where you put large garbage containers through those areas. So yeah,
Wait
I
till
do see some
Kendall Cotton
challenges.
sees these costs increase.
Right. I'm just
Oh my
saying.
God,
Sorry, I had to
Governor
throw it out
Gregg's
there.
gonna blow a gasket. Oh my God. Carrie?
thank you, Your Honor. Quickly, I want to make sure that Mr. Fisher knows I agree with him 100%. I'm not talking about trash. I'm talking about the yard refuge and the couches and the crap that gets piled in the alleys that's taken away as a courtesy. If we take away their ability to throw their trash in a container, it will absolutely be spread out all over the alley by dogs that get into it or whatever. So I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. And the second thing is maybe we need to talk about each one of those residences having their own 90-gallon can. Up in my hood, people put their cans in the garage because there's so many people that walk here and they will throw dog poop or whatever in their can if it's out. So their cans stay in the garage until garbage day. And maybe that's something that they can consider. I don't know, maybe they don't have garages if they have an alley. I don't know. But I think we just need to think out of the box on this and really look at all the different options and try not to take away from the folks who currently have something. And I don't know. I don't know. It's a lot.
Sid.
First off, I wish the scouts would have been here for this part.
Yes.
Right? This-
Yes.
I told them.
I know, huh? It gets better, right? But Susie, would you estimate that each parcel, no matter if it's alley or curbside, has the same number of gallons associated with them?
We try, yep.
Okay.
And it's challenging. It's not a perfect system, but
Yeah, it's
that's
about
the
to jump me
concept,
over
yeah.
here.
Jessica?
I think we need about 2 more on my alley. We've already got 4. We need about 2 more because there's an apartment complex right behind my house.
Apartment complexes are treated as commercial units, so they are different. So residential is 4 units or less, and then anything above that is a commercial unit.
So on one side of the alley, my side, it's houses. Other side of the alley, it's apartment.
Yep.
So we're treated the same. So they pay a commercial rate and I pay a residential rate out of the same can.
And we service that can multiple times per week. So residential only gets serviced once per week.
I've never seen it any time but Tuesday.
Some alleys are just.
Some alleys make it one, but if it's not overflowing, then we will only come once a week then also.
Flows every week.
Ryan?
Yeah, so I guess, question I had, which Carrie alluded to, when I was thinking the alley collection of, going to 4 times per year, I'm thinking of those bulk items, couches and those sort of things. But we've been focused on a discussion of if the can is full or people just don't throw it in can because they're lazy. So anything that's outside of a can we're talking about, regardless of what it is, or like if you have a regular garbage and somebody just doesn't bother putting it in a can or it's
We pick it up.
overflowing, that would still be 4 times per year under this scenario.
Yes, yeah, that would be the change. Yep.
So we can play with that where it's like, in those situations, we pick it up like as if it were in the can, but the 4 times per year is the bulk items, the non-traditional stuff.
Yep, probably, yeah. It's the couches, the bundled brush, the
Do you know
fence
how
posts
this
it.
community is gonna look? People should be forced to haul that big stuff away
Yeah,
on their own right away. Couches, refrigerator, anything that gets stacked out there is just a blight. And that should be hauled away on their own cost, separate from the city.
I didn't even know about this until now. I can start just piling stuff out there, I guess.
But no, I hope that's not what happens from this meeting, because people now are gonna be like, oh, it just gets stacked out there. The few homeowners on their block are gonna be affected. They're not gonna be able to get into their garage if they have a garbage by them. Any of this is gonna completely blight this city.
So the alley collection is the bulky items that are set outside of the can. So we're not talking what goes in the can.
Right.
This is just the outside of the can. And we send a rear loader down once a week, and we have 2 guys, and they'll go pick the stuff up on the side of the alley that people set out for us to put into the rear loader. So that is done once a week for all alley customers.
So, to that point, that could be a bag of garbage. Because if it's full and you can't put something in there,
Yeah, we're going to pick it up.
right, you're going to pick it up. So, question I have then is in any of the study, was it ever identified how many extra cans it would take on a route to go through and meaningfully extend the route, like for another trip to the landfill or something? Or does one route usually be one trip to the landfill? Or how many trips to the landfill are there per route? Because I'm just saying, if people aren't able to go through and have the capacity to throw their garbage in, if we need to go through and add more bins, if you add more bins, how many more trips does that, how long does it extend the route?
So, having the trash set beside the containers isn't very typical. At that point, we assess and make sure that we have enough bins there
Okay, yeah.
to be able to fill it with your typical domestic trash. So there's not a lot of trash just sitting in bags from typical household trash. These are different. It's a different type of collection. We do sometimes have overflow after Christmas because there's a lot of bags. Sometimes we have a little overflow in spring because everybody cleans their house in the spring. So there's kind of a little bit of happening during certain times of the year, but we should have enough containers set out for typical household trash that it shouldn't be sitting beside the can.
Well, that changes the discussion for me, because I totally agree with, like, if it's, food waste and this sort of thing versus a couch. I mean, so a couch I could see 4 times a year, but food waste, definitely not. So it's, it depends to me which it is.
Yeah, the intent of this discussion is to focus on those materials that cannot fit inside a container. So it would be materials like brush, the couch, those types of things. And a lot of cities will by ordinance state that anything that can fit in the cart is required to be placed in that cart and cannot be set out for collection outside of a cart.
I mean, this last week I've seen closet doors, roofing, fans, appliances, like everything
Everybody's home fills up.
outside
They
of
have
the
to-
can.
Sure. Yep. And we would consider that under the alley collection additional service that we would collect for those residents. Yeah.
I've been going to the dump, so I have my little punch card and I go to the dump. I don't put that stuff out there.
I don't think Mr. Prunty's gonna dole out more cards for everybody with this discussion. And then everybody's gonna be hauling up the dump, blowing out the back of their old truck that they've stalled everything, hauling everything into, and it's blowing out willy-nilly the whole way. This is terrible. Can we stop this meeting tonight?
Obviously, we knew that this would take a lot of discussion back and forth, and we've got great discussion going on. Do you mind if we circle back to it at the end of the
Let's move
presentation?
on, because this
Yeah,
is like, to me, it's like a
agreed.
dead horse we're gonna have to pick up in the alley at this point.
I've seen people
Saying,
disposing of dead horses.
we got
at
it.
the dump.
Let's go on.
Sid, really? Or
This is just, you know, I want people to think about this in between our meetings that we're talking about this, because it's really contextual, right? I'm gonna clip out that little piece of our meeting if I can and send it to my friends in Germany, because they get about a 30-gallon bin for a week, and they're sitting there tearing their garbage into these little tiny strips. Food goes in one thing. I mean, it's almost like they have an hour a day that they commit to garbage just so that they can get enough into their bag to get disposed of. It's an interesting discussion that we're having here. But you know, I would think about, you know, that's why I asked the question of, does everybody get about the same? Does every parcel get about the same gallon requirement? Because if that's the case, then I don't see a huge problem. But this is a good point of discussion, and it's very context based.
Everybody does not get the same, because you get the idiot with his Amazon boxes that doesn't break them down. They take them and throw them in the bottom of the garbage, and then they dump all their food waste on top of it, take up half the space of the garbage to where nobody else gets to use it. Then it's out in the alley. That's what happens. You don't get equal space. People don't do anything to break down a box or anything.
Nope.
I'm sensing that a couple people don't have very considerate neighbors.
Put it out there.
There we go. Apple trees. There you go. All right, let's move on to number. This is number 1 of 5 I've got. We've got 4 more.
I don't
You don't think it's going to get this far into the weeds on the next 4?
Maybe on a
Try
couple,
us.
but we'll.
Use the restroom.
That was that's a good topic. All right.
Yeah,
Move on.
the topic that you all just talked about, that one is typically going to be the one that creates the most interest in conversation, and rightfully so, because it would be a very significant change in how services are provided to your residential customers. So I definitely appreciate the different perspectives, and I think you all have good ideas on that. But this topic here is one that we talked about a little bit earlier, where we said that there is a need for additional services on the commercial side, and one way to do that would be to migrate some, but not all of your customers from 2 cubic yard bins that are collected on the back of a rear load truck to a front load vehicle that has greater flexibility in terms of the size of dumpsters that can be collected. They can be as small as 2 cubic yards, or what we would recommend for Kalispell is as high as 6 cubic yards. And so we did collaborate very closely with city staff, where they looked at where all of the different customers are located to figure out which ones of those commercial customers could be eligible to transition by having enough space to go to one of these front load style dumpsters. It's mainly a consideration for the collection vehicle to be able to get into that location to be able to provide for that type of collection. And so city staff identified that there's the equivalent of about 900 cubic yards of capacity, which is just, you multiply the number of collections per week times the size of the container, and it's about 900 cubic yards a week. But if you would go to a front load operation, you would have the capacity to pick up 1,300 cubic yards. So that, by going to this type of vehicle, would give you some built-in room for growth. It's also going to be a more streamlined type of collection operation, where you can not only collect more customers per day, but some customers, if you give them a larger size container, they could require fewer collections per week. And so that's a way to increase efficiencies. But another benefit that we see from this type of operation is the opportunity to increase safety, because your operators are not having to exit the cab on a regular basis. There's just less interaction with the containers. And then also it's a more efficient operation, so you're going to be exposing fewer people to the potential risks. So this is an operation where we have completed the preliminary financial analysis, again, subject to being updated. But what we did was we looked at, and it would take a couple of years to transition to the service, just the amount of time needed to buy vehicles and containers. But right now, you could transition about 200 of your existing customers to front load, and then you would have capacity to add on another 100 customers. And so in our financial analysis, we've accounted for the costs of that frontline and backup truck. You would need another truck just to be able to deliver containers to those customers, because they're pretty large containers to provide. You got to buy at least 200 dumpsters. You got to have the salary and benefits for your operator. You got to provide fuel, maintenance for the truck, and then the administration. Now, in this analysis, because there is so much upfront capital, we assume that this would be purchased with debt, so that you could pay that off over time. But when you look at the financial analysis in the green table over on the right-hand side, the cost of your current rear load collection program is about $652 per customer per year. But then if you would go to a front load collection with just your current number of customers, it would be more expensive at about $890 per year. But if you're able to just increase your number of customers by about 50, then your cost would come down to $680 per customer per year. So it's almost a break even. And then you have the potential additional benefit of, if you could get, say, closer to that 100 customers, then your cost would likely be lower than what the status quo is. And so, this will be another question for the council that you can talk about now, or when we get to the questions at the end. But based on the operational need, as well as what you're seeing as far as the cost of service, what would be the council's interest in the city moving forward with a front load collection operation?
To me, it's a financial, it's really just P&L. It seems to make sense to me, because looking at the other side, looking at the apartment complexes coming on, everything else like that, you'll typically see more use for a front load in those type of applications. So seeing some of the multifamily, more dense
That 50 can be
buildings
made up
coming
pretty
in,
quick, yeah.
this, I think it fills up fairly quick on this, and I think it makes it more efficient across the board, because I don't think this didn't really incorporate adding in for the expanded. This is just existing customers.
Existing customers plus another 50 new customers.
Right.
Well, with another 50 customers, that would lower the cost to $680. With existing customers, it'd be $891.
But otherwise, right now, do we have the capacity even to pick up? We don't have the capacity right now to pick up those other
We do not.
projects.
We are full
So,
as far as our commercial.
Right. So, to me, this kind of a numbers thing, but you almost have to move into this realm and do this. Okay. Carrie?
Well, I was just going to say that with the apartments that are coming online, in the next 6 months, if we pick them up and put them in this particular program and some of the others that are coming on in the near future, that would be a great place to start with it. I think it's an awesome idea. And you can't fit a couch in those. Well, I guess you could put a couch in that dumpster if you had a lot of people, but hopefully it
Not
would
recommended.
just be the trash, that would be going into those big bins.
We've had multiple inquiries from other commercial businesses too, asking us to service them, and we just haven't been able to because of the equipment we have and because we're at capacity. So we do think that there is other customers that we could expand into if we did move into the front load services.
Did we get a slide that I missed that showed the cost of a front loader compared to the other equipment?
Oh, how much?
We did not show that, but it's in that $400,000 to $450,000 range.
All right, so it's about the same as
Yeah,
the
it's-
side loader.
Sidearm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Has there been any look at roll-off on the back service? Or is that just totally outside of this?
What does that mean?
Roll-off, like a big dumpster that you roll off, so like the hospital has out back?
Okay.
Typically for construction type materials.
Yeah,
So that, to this point, that is not something that we have evaluated.
okay.
That takes a whole different truck,
Or just,
whole different style of truck and everything.
yeah, it's a whole different business model.
With the conversation, I mean, I think the expectation is that we would add those 50 customers very quickly, within 6 months or something, with all the new projects coming online and the interest, and is,
Well, timing, I think timing has to be of consideration. It usually takes us 2 years to get the trucks. So it's once we get the approval to move forward with the program, it's going to take us a couple years to actually get the trucks.
so
in.
we would have the 50 extra at the
Probably more.
beginning of implementing.
We couldn't start servicing them right away. We wouldn't have the personnel or equipment for 2 years. It just takes us that long to get the
We'd
equipment.
have to have a wait list.
Yeah, all right.
The last sidearms we just received, it was 2 years out from the time we ordered them. So, timing on that, with an approval, we would move forward with the program as fast as we could and get those ordered or bid and ordered. But it could be, based off of just past equipment purchases, it's been a couple years.
Yeah, I was just thinking in terms of the price of, people, the payment, it jump, by 300,
Yeah.
300 annually, and then it drops, I mean, but obviously that's not an issue in 2-year lag. Likely.
Moving on to 3.
Yeah, so this just summarizes some of the key benefits and challenges of front loads, many of which we've already covered. But I'll move on in the interest of time to the next topic, and that is there an interest in providing multiple cart sizes for your residential customers? So this is often referred to as pay-as-you-throw, or unit pricing, or variable rate pricing. So as you can see by the picture that's here, what cities will often do is to provide 3 different sizes of carts, in this case 95, 65, and 35 gallon. So in cities that have these services this way, they will actually charge a different price based on the size of your container. And the idea for this is to provide a financial incentive for those who generate less waste and recycle and compost more, that their pricing is accordingly based on that. So it's really trying to treat this like other utilities, where you're charged based on how much water you use, or electricity, or gas, or whatever the case may be. But in terms of applying this to the city of Kalispell, well, the idea from a benefit perspective is that it does incentivize recycling with cities that have wider gaps between their cart sizes. So what that means is, like if you're in a place like Seattle or Portland, it'll literally be like a 100% cost difference between the size of those carts. And so in those situations, that has a very profound impact on their programs. But if we look at the challenges here in Kalispell, and we'll talk about this in more detail on the next slide, but you presently do not have a curbside recycling program. And then also with the way that your system is set up, the county is the one charging directly for the cost of landfilling. And so if you would provide your customers with different size carts, it's not really going to affect directly your cost of providing that service, because the cost of picking up different size containers is virtually the same. It can vary a little bit depending on how quickly the truck fills up, but the amount of effort to use an arm to pick up a different size container is not really that material. And so where we find variable rates to really work well are in those communities that want to create those big gaps between the rates, and where they can provide a direct link between those rates and the level of service that's being provided. And so that's just a bit more of a challenge, again, here in Kalispell because of the not having a recycling program presently, and then what's happening from a landfill perspective. It also can be a challenge when you have an annual assessment in terms of providing the billing, because customers may want to change their container size more frequently. And then also you've got to buy a broader, wider range of inventory when you've got to try to guess what different size carts your customers are going to want to have. And so on this one, we would like to offer a preliminary recommendation, and that is to keep your collection cart sizes where they are presently, but with this being a long-term plan, to come back and review this alternative if and when you're able to implement a successful recycling program, as well as able to provide for a greater service capability and mechanisms to ensure accountability, and then also that you can make sure that your cost to implement this alternative can be supported by the customer. So we really look at this one as being, and we work with a lot of communities that very successfully have different cart sizes, but for these challenges that we're seeing right now in Kalispell, it would be a real difficulty to have that work here in this community.
Brian?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, a couple thoughts on this one. It wouldn't apply to alleys because you don't have individual bins, which is a real frustration of mine. I would, because my experience is not with so much as like Jessica's, but that, the people I share the bin with, they take up, 90% of the space. But anyways, that's one, is that it wouldn't apply to everyone in the city. But I do see, despite the recycling, not lacking in a recycling program, a benefit of doing this is try and reduce consumption and packaging in terms of waste, which is a positive for, I think, the planet. But and then also, bigger households are going to have more waste, so you're kind of it becomes like a cost per person. It gets closer to a cost per person rather than per household, because a bigger household is going to have more waste, and they're paying for it with a bigger bin. So I would really like to see us go in this direction, though I recognize the challenges there with it, given our particular situation. But ultimately, I do like that disincentive to just be wasteful. And I think, unfortunately, we can't apply it to alleys, but it would be great because it would address some of the problems that we see in the alleys. People throwing, just being really wasteful, and that's a problem for a whole bunch of reasons.
I'd like to add to that a little bit too. I mean, because, you mentioned the disconnect between the county and the city, because the county has the landfill. And then, we're bringing our city trash to the county. And so there's that pay discrepancy you were talking about. But that county landfill, I mean, how many more years do we have on this? You will probably know but I go out to that county landfill, and I know that there have been parcels that have been recently bought, and we're already using those new parcels. No?
55 more years.
55.
Mount Refuge can get way bigger. The base can spread, and then, it can get a lot bigger.
And then
So that'll be Mount Kalispell?
Mount Refuge.
Mount Refuge. I mean, and I really like the pay as you throw away. And Sid, your comment about, you know, your friends in Germany, how they're trying to get everything in there. I mean, we have a really sort of distorted view on like what we throw away and our garbage. And, you know, I'd like to see, you know, us as a community maybe think about this in a larger sense, because I understand what your recommendation is here. You know, it is a problem, but, you know, maybe this is a question that we need to bring to the community and be just like, hey, you know, we've got to tackle our garbage, you know, and here are our questions. Do we want a successful, you know, recycling program so we can have pay as you throw instead of these big bins out there, you know? I mean, we need to like really kind of rein in, you know, our consumption and our garbage creation. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, I know I think about it a lot, and it's always on the forefront of my mind. When I go and I purchase a product, I will buy a product that has less packaging because I don't want to have that impact on our landfill. I recycle everything that I possibly can, and I put less garbage in my community garbage can than other people probably do. And I think that, you know, we as a community need to start thinking about that. I think it's important. You know, sure, 55 years, and is that considering like the increase in population? Are we extrapolating out for that? Still, I mean, 55 years is really, it's a long time, but it's not a long time, you know? And in 55 years, you know, what's going to happen then? Where's the garbage going to go then?
I can remember 50 years ago going to the landfill and we were throwing it in a big hole, and I was worried Dad was going to back up and we were going to fall in.
I remember 10 years ago
Yeah.
going to the landfill and it being completely different than it is right now. So, I mean, it's on the forefront of my mind, and every purchase that I make and everything that I put in my garbage can. And I think that it's a question that we need to pose to our community, because, you know,
Best
the recommendation is to stay
The
with what
best
we've
thing
got.
is seeing where does the recycled stuff actually really go.
And that is a whole other conversation, and we can have that
So we
conversation.
feel really good,
Yeah.
but then we learn where it goes. and
Because
we go,
really, the only two true things that we can recycle is aluminum and metal and glass. Because plastic is a farce. It's like the big tobacco lie. It's the big plastic lie. You know, you can't recycle it. So, you know, our relationship with plastic has to change. But I digress.
Don't get me started on paper bags at the grocery store because I miss them horribly. So
So I didn't want to give anybody the impression that Germany's got this nailed, because they don't have the landfill area to use, because Germany's smaller than Montana, right? They burn the vast majority of their garbage. So I mean, if you want to burn it, it's a whole different story. But
waste energy.
there's a cost to everything. So and I think we're doing the right thing here by looking about, what we're doing now, what we can do in the future, and how much it's going to cost us, right? So I appreciate the study and the way we're going here.
Jed?
Just real quick, I guess I could go through and see, the difference in sizes. It does go through and allow for people to go, kind of what you were talking about, Ryan, is it does allow people to pick their amount that fits their household. Like, so I've got a retired person living next to me. It's just them, and I've got my house. I generate more. I use the 90-gallon bin. If they wanted to go and do the smaller one, they'd be able to determine, their bill that way. But I'm seeing on here that it's not really set in place to go through and really be able to track that very well from what I'm reading. And the other thing about it, though, is that, they're not always using the capacity in their 90-gallon bin, but the time that they need to use it and it's not there, then it's a problem. So I think the other side of that coin is people not going and using the capacity in their 90-gallon bin all the time. It's there when they do need to use it. So I'm kind of both sides of that, but I don't know, maybe at some point, something like
What's it
that.
cost per year for the 90 for a rollout? Yeah,
Do you have 141?
141.
Or is it
And that's, and again, as it says there, that's
141.
that's-
141?
collection and transport. Nothing to do with tipping.
Yeah.
That's why it's gonna cost us the same to collect and transport.
Got it,
Yeah.
You're right.
I think that's the harder challenge is,
Yeah.
you know, because our service is just collection and transport, we would have to have an additional expenditure for different cart sizes. So, and then we'd have to keep track of it. The way we assess is, we just do it on our taxes. So in August, we send the tax bill to the county and it goes on, your taxes that way. So we don't have a lot of variability on the way we provide the assessment. And then we're still driving there once a week and collecting the waste. So the costs are very similar. So there's not a lot of cash benefit, if you will. And I know Scott can speak more to that than I can, but it's really challenging.
Yeah.
Well, and I was just going to comment on that is, I understand the cost of the same collect and transport, but there's only so much capacity in a truck, right? And so as we grow, if each individual unit is a higher, waste volume, as opposed to, the system where they pay, it creates a disincentive for, greater waste production, then you're not needing to add that extra truck as quickly because you're putting kind of a disincentive into the service for waste production.
I think
Per
that
unit.
it's definitely a positive way to look at future process. But let's say we offer different cart sizes and one person out of a neighborhood chooses to do it, then it actually never comes to fruition. So I think you'd have to have more people buy into that, and it's really challenging still, to not project and forecast based off of everybody using a 90. It's very challenging. And then we don't have anything to offset what those waste generations are without having a recycling program in place, which is kind of, they go together with pay as you throw type of processes. So I get you. I understand that. I do. I don't know if it will ever play out that way. It's just a risk type of deal. All right.
Can we talk about chickens?
Oh,
Oh,
wait,
that's-
we're gonna talk about, we're gonna
Great
Chickens.
story. though.
Recycling.
That is a great story.
Recycling, there we go.
Yeah.
You'll
Yeah,
hurt
so
the local
in the
egg
work
farmers though.
in the work that we do, we work with many cities to either implement and or improve existing recycling programs. So recycling is a really important part of the work that we do, and we'll talk in a minute about projects that we're doing in Bozeman and Helena for recycling as well. But when it comes to looking at recycling here in Kalispell, there are kind of similar to the structure of some of the other slides. There's a number of benefits, but then also there are some challenges. And so what we wanted to do with you all tonight is just to walk through what some of those benefits and challenges are with the different components of a curbside recycling program. So the first one is related to carts. And so if you would provide a recycling program and do that with carts, then you're going to be providing a lot of additional capacity and viable options for your residents to then recycle material rather than putting that as they do now within their trash. But that also, from a challenge, is going to require the purchase of more carts, the management and inventory of them. And then from a collection perspective, from a benefit perspective, if you have a recycling program, it's going to minimize the strain on your existing your existing solid waste routes. Kind of like what you all were just talking about, where if you have somebody putting out less material on the trash side, that truck is going to fill up not as quickly, and so won't have to go to the landfill quite as many times. However, a challenge with that is you are going to have a whole other set of routes that would be required to provide recycling services. So that's not a bad thing at all, but there are going to be costs for that truck as well as the the people to operate that. And then when material is collected, a lot of times it will be collected together, and so you need to have a processing facility that can then separate that material out so that it can then actually be processed to go away from landfills. But from a challenge perspective, those types of facilities are pretty limited in this market. And in fact, a lot of the other communities within the state of Montana are having to send their materials either to facilities in the state of Washington, Utah, or Colorado to be processed. And then once those materials are recycled, they can then be used for end markets to support local secondary processing markets. But again, the challenge is that in many cases, you've got to haul these materials long distances, either to Salt Lake City or Spokane, in order to create that material for end markets. There's a lot of really great benefits from an education and outreach perspective. Topics that are really important today are carbon impacts in terms of greenhouse gases. And then you have so many new people moving to the state of Montana and to Kalispell that they're maybe or very likely moving from areas where they probably already have curbside recycling. So that's likely to be an expectation that they have when they move here. But it's also education is really important, but it also is a challenge in that requires significant resources for that, so that your residents can understand what those programs look like. And so we just really wanted to give you a sense that, while many communities really want to provide recycling, you do have some relatively unique challenges here in Montana, and then here in Kalispell as well. And so your current program is largely through Valley Recycling, to where they will accept residential and commercial material via a source separated scenario, so that you can bring those materials to them. And so this is a no cost option. And again, with the limited infrastructure and capacity, it does make recycling here a bit of a challenge. And so for right now, the most cost-effective approach doesn't mean that it's the one that you want to go with, but most cost-effective would be to utilize your existing recycling option. And part of our basis for, it's not advancing.
Time.
Well, the next slide is the one that compares the programs for the cities of Helena and Bozeman. And so I'll talk about, oh, there we go. Thank you. So Helena, they provide both recycling via drop-off sites, as well as they have a private company that does provide curbside recycling. Their material is taken to a transfer station, which is a facility that will take all the material that's collected, put it into larger vehicles to prepare it for long hauling to recycling facilities, again, in Colorado and in Washington. And so in Helena, the annual cost is about $193 per household per year. The city pays roughly half of that, so the residents are picking up the other half. But it's almost $200 a year for that service. And then in the city of Bozeman, it's currently a program that's used by about 5,200 customers on a subscription basis. So it's an optional type service. And it's about half of the people in Bozeman presently have that service. And so on an annual basis there, it's almost $200 per year. They do pay for that service on a monthly basis. We just converted it to the annual numbers so that it would be comparable to here in Kalispell. And so when you look at what your current assessment cost is, which is, in that 140 to go up to $150 plus range. If you would provide recycling, it would be at least equal to or likely greater than what that cost would be. So we're going to talk in a few minutes about the survey that's been launched. And so one of the questions we're asking in the survey is first, for your residents, what is their interest in getting recycling to see how receptive they would be? Do they want that service? But then we're also going to ask them, what is their willingness to pay for that service? Because they may say, yeah, we'd love to have it. That'd be great. But we're going to ask them, what's the maximum amount that they would be willing to pay that would go up to $200 per household per year. So I think once we get the results of the survey back, that'll be very helpful to provide some guidance for the city. I mean, if you have a lot of residents that are saying, yeah, that they would be fine with paying that higher dollar amount, then I think, recycling could be something that you would want to look seriously at. Whereas if a lot of your residents say that they don't want to pay that much for it, then you may want to go in a different direction. And again, we'll have the results of that survey back in a few weeks. I truly wish that I could be here before you tonight and say, yeah, recycling is a slam dunk, that it's going to be, a relatively reasonable cost, but there are, unfortunately, with where you're located and distances from markets, it's just there's not an inexpensive solution for recycling in this area.
So Helen is subscription. So it's, if you want to recycle, you call them and say, I want to recycle. You sign up for it. The city subsidizes from all the taxpayers for each person who elects to do it.
Right. Yeah. And in the case of Bozeman, that's where it's more of the subscription-based service.
But Helena isn't everybody's recycling. It is, if I want to recycle, I let them know and they set me up. With the
Yeah,
right
I would need to check on that one, Mayor.
Okay. I would just be curious
yep.
to see what their
Yep.
tact was, because
Yeah, we can get that information to get more fine-tuned details on the program.
So when we're talking recycling, I just want to make sure we're talking papers, aluminum, glass, computer, batteries, lithium vehicle, EV batteries.
Not for this particular program.
Okay.
I mean, for material that would be collected as in your curbside, it would be the first set of material categories that you described.
Okay.
Cardboard, is cardboard in there?
I'm waiting.
Yeah, typically it would be cardboard, aluminum. I understand what you were saying earlier about plastics, but some plastics, like plastic bottles and detergent bottles, those are very recyclable. So those would typically be a part of a curbside recycling program.
So with this part of what we're talking about in mind, why isn't this something that the private market would just pick up if it was something needed and wanted? I know there's a couple of smaller ones out there that go around and do it, but I've always been kind of surprised that, there wasn't something larger going through and doing that.
Honestly,
I
I think
think-
it's the
I think it was my understanding that at one point that was tried here in Kalispell, but it was not successful. And I don't know if anybody.
I don't know. I can't really speak to that. Does anybody else know?
There have been private. They haven't been very successful. I don't know why. I do know that from the community I hear from, there's a real interest in recycling.
Well,
it'll be interesting to see what the survey.
I think that to the point of so many people moving in here from out of state, from other areas, asking for that type of a service, I would think it would get more popular as something that a private company would go through and do, whether it's evergreen disposal, and they branch out into that or something. I don't know, but
you still got to ship it to.
oh no,
Spokane.
definitely the end result's still the same. That's kind of where I'm kind of like, to me, this doesn't fit into with what I want to do with the council, because I think it's something that could be done in the private market.
Yeah, you're not going to get that picked up by a private market. There isn't a cost-effective recycling program in the United States. There's been a lot of studies on it. And now the benefits to greenhouse gas and stuff like that, I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about pure cost. They're always subsidized, and it end up being subsidized out of the general fund if it's government owned, and if it's private, the companies go under.
Jed, you were still with the county when the county stopped paying for the recycling cardboard
Yes.
program?
Yes,
And when that recycling program ended, did those bins go away,
those bins went away,
except for a couple in town?
except for a couple in town. And I was involved in another recycling company that rented property down at Kalispell Feed and Grain that would take everyone's glass and break it up and make
Right.
decorative rock and things like
Tumble
that.
it.
They went belly up as well. I still do see some green machine totes on the east side of Kalispell, but not near as many as there used to be. It just seems to be very few people who must pay a much higher fee that are totally committed to it that keep having the bins for that one company.
All right, so we've talked a little bit about the customer survey, but we have a slide a couple slides that will get into more detail about it, so. So, we worked very closely with the city to develop the questions so that they are very customized for the issues at hand here in Kalispell, like the recycling one being an example. So it did go live last week on the 19th, and then we're looking to keep it open until February 9th. We'll collaborate with the city to see how the responses are coming in. So if we need to extend it beyond that, that's very easy to do. But we'll keep in close contact to see how that's going. The easiest way to participate in the survey is this is an active QR code. You can just point your phone with the camera on and it'll take you to that. You can also just go to the city's website as well. So we would really encourage you all on the council to please let your constituents know that we want to hear from them, as well as other outlets in the city to promote this survey, as it's a great way to really help inform a lot of these key policy issues that we've been talking about this evening. And then some of the topics that are covered in the survey are current service levels, the level of service, how satisfied are your businesses and residents with their services, and then like we talked about for recycling, what's their receptiveness to program changes, and then what's their price sensitivity or willingness to pay for those types of changes.
So we do have questions in there about alley collection. So trying to get a feel what our alley customers, if they would be okay with potentially changing the alley service collection to 4 times a year instead of every week. So
Why would you ask that question?
to get an understanding of what our residents are thinking.
I did go and take the survey this weekend. It was very easy, very straightforward to take, and good job.
Good, thank you. Yeah, everybody else, please take it. So as far as next steps, upcoming tasks like we just talked about, would encourage you all to please continue to promote that survey participation. We're going to continue our collaboration with the city on the operational and financial evaluation of the different approaches that we've been talking about tonight, and then continue refining the financial analysis so that ultimately we'll develop rate recommendations for the future. And then we'll be looking to present the results of the survey, as well as the continued refinement of the evaluation during a meeting in March, and then continue working to develop the draft master plan. So what we wanted to wrap up the discussion with you all about tonight is we've identified these 8 different topics to request council direction on. I think we've gotten a lot of really good discussion on maybe not all, but just about all of these. So I would also defer, Susie, to you and the mayor, city manager. Do you feel like we've addressed these well enough for tonight? Do you want to continue the conversation? I know you had talked about possibly reconvening in a few weeks to pick it back up then. What is your preference?
Yeah, I would encourage you to take some time
Yeah.
and contemplate them.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's great if we can move forward, but these are some pretty weighty policy decisions that have implications, you know, in terms of level of service versus rates and how those rates get distributed. And if just even the discussion tonight, you know, popped up new things. Hey, a subscription potentially for extra services. How would that work and some of those things? So a lot of really good discussion. I would feel bad putting you on a spot to make these decisions tonight, but I'm happy to follow council direction on that.
I'd like to see the survey results, get a little bit more feel from the public before we just, I mean, kind of the point of
Yeah.
doing the survey.
And that may be the second meeting then in February?
Yeah, I would shoot for the second meeting in February.
Yeah, if we're looking to get the survey results
Enough time to
assimilated.
evaluate it and put those numbers
Yeah,
to something that would be beneficial for everybody.
The only caveat I would put to that is, you know, again, we'll collaborate with you all to see how the survey responses are coming in. But if you all say, hey, let's give it another week or two to see if we can get some more responses in, you know, that could create a need to delay that meeting time.
Yeah, and we could always.
But that'll just be y'all's decision.
So you're primarily letting people know Facebook, social media.
Facebook, social media, and I thought our reporter might be able to put it in the paper
That's kind of what I was hoping to.
and post that and get the word out for us a little bit. Appreciate it.
We put it on Flathead 411, right?
That doesn't prevent others from pushing it that way if they want. It's fine. It's a good survey.
We also put it out on the news flash and public service announcement, which citizens can actually sign up to receive in their emails.
I'll make sure to tweet it out.
Sid, we're not gonna hear from people in Germany, are we?
Oh, no. I might, but
So I guess I would just have one thing as we're kind of wrapping this up. I've always been very impressed with our solid waste department that we have, and I think that is a true testament to the leadership that is in the department for both of you. And one thing that I hear from folks is how nice our trucks look. They think they are brand new. I tell them they're not brand new. They just take the time and pride to keep them clean and operable, and thank you for that.
It's not that way every place.
I actually hear the same thing as well, and I see it when I'm driving around.
Yep.
So you know, those things as we see, they're very expensive. So it's nice to see that they're taken well care of. So
Yeah, we have a great supervisor, great superintendent, great operators that take a lot of pride in the service they provide, and they love their trucks.
It shows.
Okay, anything else in this? Is there anyone for public comment?
Let me look here. No, there's not.
Okay, Mr. Russell.
Yeah, well, like I say, wrap it up. Great discussion. As I mentioned, we're starting off budget discussions. Might as well throw it up with, you know, this big explosion as we can to kick it off with, you know, a lot of weighty policy discussions as we have tonight. But like I say, it's you know, the start of the process, and appreciate all the discussion. Just looking ahead, next week's the fifth Monday, so we're not having a meeting for that. The next one, the regular meeting, one of the items coming up is requirement every 10 years, local government review. So we have to pass a resolution putting on a June ballot for a local government review question to the voters. So that'll be on February 5th. One of the things that goes with it, and we put it in, they put it in every 10 years, but what's that mean from a financial perspective? Because you have to fund it, local government funds it. You're able to go above 1510 420 with that. So you have to put in enough to, well, you don't have to, you can just eat it within the general fund, but obviously most municipalities put it on the election component. but you have to account for 2 elections, training for a study review commission. So you may be looking right off the bat, $50,000 for it. And that doesn't include any surveys or community outreach. And if you're talking about things like maybe a charter change, you're going to want to educate the community. So I'm just putting it up front. I'm going to put it in at 2 mills, which should be able to feed that in. You're looking at about 150,000. So in comparison, we're looking at 100,000 for our public education campaign on our current levy without funding the 2 elections. So I just wanted to prepare everyone for that's what I'm looking at putting in for that resolution. But it is one that we do have to pass, and it has to go on for the June ballot. So that'll come forward at the next regular meeting. And that's all I have.
Okay, anything from council? I'm just gonna do the whole what I do, start.
Probably very few are going to have comments today. We'll see. Great discussion tonight. I appreciate it. I'm appreciative of our solid waste program as it stands today, and hopefully we can continue to improve in the future. But I did take it as a personal challenge because we don't have a lid exposure fine to put a couch into my 90-gallon bin. That's my takeaway for tonight.
Hey, you've got the freedom to do what you want. Nothing, just, Chad, nothing.
Go Niners.
Go Ravens.
I just have a quick question. If the voters decide not to pass that, then we don't do the review?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
so,
wanted to
so,
clarify.
yeah, so the ballot language would be to vote in favor of doing a local government review or to not do a local
Not do it.
government review.
Okay.
And it's a extended process, so just quickly go over it, because you may be curious. So it's if that will go on the ballot in June. If they vote yes to do it, then in November, there'd be on the ballot for members to the commission. And then they could review, recommend no changes. If they recommend no changes, then it's done. If they want changes, then it's another year for the next general election. So it's a long process that goes out through it if they go forward with it.
Thank you.
I don't know if it's ever been approved in Flathead County or the city of Kalispell in terms of going forward with that, but
Okay.
like I say, it's a requirement by state law and the Constitution for every 10 years to put it before the voters to give them that opportunity for a local government review.
It has not been approved in the
It
last
hasn't?
30 years. I've watched it every time I sat on one of the committees. It has not been approved in 30 years.
But it goes out to the voters,
It
gives them
has to
that,
go,
that option and
yes.
that choice.
Yep.
Just a planning ahead question with President's Day. Are we meeting on Tuesday or do we meet on President's Day in February coming up?
We do.
17th is President's Day. We'll meet on the 18th, Tuesday.
Tuesday?
Okay.
Thank you. Just planning ahead. Thanks.
Wait, the 17th is a Monday?
I should probably double check now that you're asking me that.
Because that's my birthday. I thought it was on a
Oh,
Saturday.
Happy birthday.
Sorry.
sorry, I know I passed.
Out of turn.
Yes,
I know.
I'm wrong. Yes, that's our President's Day. So yes, the 19th.
19th, yeah.
President's Day, so the meeting in February.
Okay, Mr. Fisher, I'll allow you to break protocol.
Thank you, I'm sorry. I've already let the manager know, but I will be out of town the month of February. I'm actually homeless anyhow, so it kind of works out because of flooding issues in my home. But I will be taking my mom south to California for some medical things, but I will be Zooming in on the regular business meetings, but not the work session. I just thought I'd make it public.
Okay. Ooh, hopefully those problems get solved. So, the only thing I had, as I sat back and I listened to the conversation tonight, we're dealing with these local government issues. These are things that affect our neighbors. I mean, it's like so when we talk about chickens, it's the ground level things that impact everybody the most. And yeah, we take this away. Carrie's right. We're going to hear about it. Everyone's right. We're going to hear if we take these things away. And what really kind of crossed my mind was, you've heard me complain before. How many legislators in Helena have ever served on a city council? So as you commented, well, what about the ADUs? Does that add to, maybe potentially it has an impact. But I'm listening to this conversation and just question. I guarantee you, in Helena, they never had that conversation. Well, what's that mean about water delivery, sewer delivery, garbage pickup, snow plowing, or any of that we have to deal with on a daily basis? It just shows that we actually do have more impact on people's day-to-day lives than some of the knuckleheads in Helena do. So I think it just kind of further reinforces the point that I will be sending out envelopes, return register receipt to several people for our budget meetings. And we'll get those out when we get the date set for that, Mr. Russell. I want to notify them well ahead of time so we can't have a scheduling conflict with other committee meetings or anything else like that in Helena. So I am going to invite, as I said, every one of those people that I talked about. Because as I watch the makeup of this committee that's been formed on taxation review in Montana, I'm glad we have a couple voices from Flathead County. But I really question what's going to come out of this that is acceptable to local government. What I'm waiting for is the attack on us going, no, 1% increase. Oh, and any levy you want to do, any increase in rate, that's got to go to the voters. When we face these type of cost increases, I mean, just this report alone on what's it cost for a garbage truck, that goes into our budget. So when we go from 275 to 425 on a budget, on a truck, that goes into the budget. So this, Mr. Kendall Cotton, this, Mr. Greg Gianforte, this is how our budgets climb. It's not us going, oh, we're going to expand and do more things. We're going to hire more people. We're going to do that. No, we need the tools to accomplish the jobs we've elected to do as cities, delivering services our people demand. And it's going to be interesting to see what are the results of the survey. If it comes back, we want recycling, we don't care what the cost is, Helena's going to care what that cost is. So I want everyone to understand, as we go through this process, it may very well bite us in the backside because we got the watchdogs in Helena saying we spend too much money, and they've never sat down to see how we budget, how we spend, or the impact they have on what we have to do for. So I just thought it was interesting to sit back because I guarantee you they did not care about what size of a garbage container we have. Is there a couch sitting next to it or not? So anyway, just interesting thought that came to my mind. And I will honestly say, I think it's go Ravens. I'm just so tired of, I just don't really care who's watching the game from the boxes. I don't really care about the pop stars. I don't need to see a touchdown and, an immediate, what's Taylor doing? I really don't care. It's more fun just to watch and go, did the Niners lose? Dad's going to be happy.
Why you gotta be a hater?
Hey, buddy.
Come grab more pickles.